All right, folks, today's the day. I finally decided that I'm going to pull up at least this panel of plywood in my Lund Classic 1660. It's a 16.5 foot Lund boat, very common. It became, I guess, the Rebel XL after, I don't know what year exactly, but this is new to me. I've had it a couple of years now. Love the boat, it's been fantastic. There are a few soft spots in the plywood when I bought it. Actually didn't know that when I bought it, but here we are. I already redid all of this plywood and reused the carpet that was there, except of course the black carpet that's here. I couldn't reuse the gray that was there. But that's not the point of this video. The point of this video is I couldn't find anything online relating to how to get these floors up. I still really don't know. Oops. I still don't really know how to get this up, but I'm going to explore it and hopefully share it with the internet, because there just didn't seem to be anything out there showing kind of like, well, does this go under? Does this go under? Do I have to remove this? How are these things affixed? None of that information I could find online, so I'm going to give it a try. This particular piece, I believe, goes right from the back all the way to the front. I don't know how far this way, probably, I'm assuming maybe a ½ inch at most. Along this line here, I should have taken the stuff out here before recording, but inside these vestibules at the bottom, it's the same vinyl, but it's about 1.5 to 2 inches higher than this floor is. So I don't suspect these things are, of course, the same pieces. So I'm really hoping it's really only just tucked in a little bit here and not actually over very far. It's of course riveted, as would be standard practice, right? So riveted all the way across. I'll have to take my rod holders off to access the bottom ones here. I took a couple of seat bases off and then realized, yeah, I should probably record this because I'm guessing there are people out there that would have the same questions as me. You can see it's 5/8 plywood like the rest of the boat. The foam actually doesn't have water in it, which I'm a bit surprised by. So here we go. First things first, I'm basically just taking off the bases and taking a look around. Then what I'm going to do is inside the vestibule here, I'm pretty sure that this back section does in fact have to come out, because these boards here, I don't see a joint or anything. I think this goes straight under. So I'm hoping that this piece here is the only one I actually have to take off. So I'll be looking for the bolts, etc. for that. It actually doesn't look too bad, because on the inside you can see there are screws into the floor, which is just straight into this plywood. I doubt anything else. So there's 3 here, a couple across the front, and then a couple into the side sheet metal, right into this thing, which actually is quite robust. So I sort of assume they're just basically self-tappers in there. I can see a couple of other rivets in behind here that will pop out. Hopefully I can move, oh yeah, I can move that stuff well enough to be able to access it. I don't think there's, it's hard to tell if there's anything under here, because something's got to tie it into this back portion, right, this fold here. Hard to tell, I don't know. I guess, yeah, I wonder if it's really just the back of the, let me put this here like this. These are the screws, of course, or the bolts actually in this case, that hold these top lids on, the hinges. So my assumption is that those are just dual purpose, also holding this whole bench onto the back components. So anyways, it'll be an exploration. Sorry, this video is a little bit long, but here we go. I'll let you know what I find. All right, so quick note, in order to remove these rivets, if you just take a drill bit and just screw down into the center of it. You can pop just the top off, and then it's easy enough to remove that without damaging this vinyl, because ultimately I want to reuse this piece of vinyl because it's in perfect condition. If I can. We'll see how it comes out, but if I can, I'd like to reuse it, because this stuff, surprisingly, at least in my area in Canada here, is very expensive. Okay, so after removing the seat bases, the rivets, some rivets I left in because the floor is so badly rotted in those spaces, they're not hanging on to anything anyway, so they're not going to be a problem. But I noticed that in order to get these guys out, it's probably easier to remove this back thing first, and then remove the remaining components back there. I was also thinking, once I get this thing undone, this middle part is only done with screws, not rivets. So I might actually, if I'm going to take this bench out, I might take this out too, to inspect the fuel lines. And I know that on my gas gauge here, I tested it before the gauge works. The sending unit I think is wonky, so we're gonna see what we can do about that too. If we're gonna pull up this back thing, we may as well do that at the same time. So who knows, this might turn into a bigger project than anticipated, but for now, this is the game plan. See if I can pop that guy out. Looks like it's just screws in the bottom. These back screws on the hinges, or bolts rather. I don't know how this is attached. I might have to take this top part off. We'll see as we go. Okay, so new discovery. So I pulled up all the screws from the floor here, and when I removed there's only two. There's one here and there's one here that go into the side compartment to hold this thing. You can kind of see it moves around a little bit. The first one I pulled out was this. The second one I pulled out turned out to be a short bolt, wherever it is here, this guy. So just be aware, not everything you see in here that seems like it's a screw is a screw. This bolt came out simply, I guess I should have thought about it, given that it's right here, you have access inside the rod locker to the holes. So why one was a screw and one was a bolt is beyond me, but that's what it was. So if you have access, check it first, because you might be dealing with a screw versus a bolt, which of course is different if you're just trying to pull it out from one side. You actually have to stop the nut on the other side, clearly. So anyway, just a note. All right, so confirmed to get these back hatches off. All that's holding on is a double duty bolt across here to hang on to the back. So that was holding this hatch on, but at the same time, of course, that meant that the rest of the platform was also attached to it. So I think that definitely had to come off. All right, another update, a little bit frustrating. So I've got everything disconnected here, everything across the, well, sorry, not the front here, but we'll see about that. Everything in here, here. But to get this middle section out, these are all bolts, which is good, you know, because this is a pedestal location. So I mean, it's good that it's all bolted in, but so are these for the actual pedestal itself. So the only access is through your bilge. You have to put your hand in a really strange way to go and get these vice grips onto the nuts that are on the backs of these, because I suspect the only way to get to the nuts on the backs of these is once this is removed through this center hole. So unfortunately that's an extra step, but hopefully it doesn't take too long. But that's, as far as I can tell, that's the situation, because the back of this cabinet is connected to this lip in some way, because I can't move it when I jiggle it. So sadly, I think it's just a case of having to do that. I understand that for boat manufacturer, why they would do the whole floor first and then put the stuff on. But man, for future repair, what a pain. I really wish they would have just done a seam right across there. I mean, why not? Would have been just do one run of plywood that way, and then do your 3 here, but just like end it right there, or even a 1/2 inch in, because this is what's gonna rot right here, not so much what's back there. So I mean, make it easy for the user, but I guess speed of production, here we are. All right, so this thing's out now. That was a bit of a pain. But now, yeah, as confirmed, these are definitely bolts. I can feel nuts on the back of them. So I'll just have to get the socket set that I'm using over there onto each one of these, pull them off. This whole top plate will then come off. And then, hopefully, I'll be into the last few screws to take this guy off and finally get to the floor component that we were looking for. Yeah, so far I'm in about an hour and a half maybe. And I guess we're getting there. We'll see what happens. All right, all the bolts are done. That was a 1/2 hour deal because they're in tough to locate spots, but with the right tools, you know, I just used a small, what is this guy? Felt like a 3/8 kind of deal. Where are we here? Yeah, it is. It's a 3/8 socket for the bolts. Hold them on the back, and then use the impact driver to pull them out the front. Anyway, without further ado, here's the reveal. Now we can see the bilge properly. This piece of plywood looks okay. I'll inspect it more closely here. It looks like there's actually some nice aluminum backer for the seat base, which is nice to see. I do see a little bit of rot there. I guess that's, no, that still feels good. It's really just a bit of surface stuff. No, I don't think I have to touch that. That's pretty good. Yeah, so anyway, so onwards. That's now off. What do we got in here? Gnarly looking bilge. It's always nice. Gas tank. Well, that would be why my lights don't work.
I don't know, I'll have to inspect this more closely and see what we're dealing with, but overall, I'm happy that we're this far. It is interesting though, because I can move this front piece away. You see this moves out. These guys must still be connected to something. Looks like down here, there's still another bar. Actually, it is a bit of a pain to get this thing out, I gotta tell you. It's not as straightforward as I would have hoped. And actually you can see here, the fold in this comes forward and locks this in. So it's actually not bolted across the back. It's really just this fold that's holding it when the top plate's on. So it's kind of sandwiched in there. So, I mean, that's kind of interesting, I suppose. Point of this video really is that I couldn't find any information about how these things are assembled so that you can actually decide whether you want to bother disassembling for this kind of floor repair. So sorry if it's boring for some, but for those of you contemplating this project, I'm hoping this video is helpful because you can actually see how these Lund boats are put together. This is a 2006 classic 1660 that then became the Rebel XL. I forget what model, SS or something like that, sort of mid 2000s. It's basically the same hull, I imagine. The difference is you have jump seats here in the Rebel version, and the classic was just straight across with hatches. I've often thought, actually, the Rebel, they made a couple of good changes too, in the sense that these are vestibules in the Rebel as well, but you have a jump seat here, right? So you can actually sit somebody there with a backrest and all that kind of good stuff. That's really nice, because actually that would be a nice place to sit 2 additional passengers that I can do. They can just sit on the vestibule, or I could mount a seat there or something like that. However, the bigger change that I see is these 2 spots here in the Classic. This is too far back. This gets in the way. I have a little tree somewhere here. Where is it? Yeah, up here. I do a lot of Great Lakes trolling, and so this tool tree that I built goes into that center section right there. And when I've got this here, though I tried to make it really low profile, this seat is pretty tight for the person sitting here. It's also too far back. So in the Rebel, I noticed they took this seat and they moved them forward. So it's more like here, and then, you know, not directly beside the driver's seat, but instead, I want to say it's like here in the new model, which actually makes a lot more sense. Even just for weight distribution, that makes more sense. So I don't know, we'll see. I may end up trying to make that modification in here, just move the seat posts and the seat locations forward. It'll just depend on what I run into, but anyways, hopefully this is somewhat useful. We're going to pull this guy apart and see what else needs to come out in order to pull this. Really, it's hilarious because it's really just this piece that I'm looking to take out. I may end up doing more, but for now, I literally just want to take this guy out. It's summertime. I don't want to get into a crazy rebuild of this thing. I want to get out and use this boat still. So yeah, we'll see. Okay, onwards. All right, folks, exciting moment here. Finally got all the rivets out, etc. And I've pulled the plywood out. You can see how rotten this thing is all the way through here. It was very, very soft. The front edge is like basically disappeared. So I'm going to take this out of the boat and stencil it onto a new piece of 5/8 and hopefully be able to put this thing back in. Now that I'm looking at it, I'm kind of wondering if I'm going to have to leave the seats where they are, simply because the vinyl is already cut in those locations. And I really don't want to spend money on more vinyl because it's A, hard to get here, and second of all, even just for a piece like that, I'm probably into 200 bucks worth just to buy a part roll in order to put this vinyl in. So we'll see. I'll pull it apart and I guess just try and see what happens. Like everything else in this project, just kind of clean it up and do the best I can. But anyways, if you're curious what it looks like inside your Lund under the floor, it looks like longitudinal stabilizers here, and things are just literally screwed in to the edges. I actually thought for sure there were going to be supports going this way, but as it turns out there aren't. And I mean, I imagine there are some stringers and whatnot underneath the foam here, but yeah, overall this is interesting that it's actually going in that direction. I thought for sure there were some going that way, but I suppose not. Either way, I'm glad to be this far, and we continue now. So I'm going to pull this out, clean out all the garbage that's in here, and give it a good vacuum, let it dry out a bit,
and see what we do for, see if we can save this vinyl, I guess, is the next thing, right? So pull this all off and see what happens with keeping some of this vinyl intact. That's the goal. Now, actually, one last thing. What's interesting too is these seat posts, you can see some of the screws just went into foam. There's nothing in there. So they really are just sheet metal screws. Now, mind you, they're fairly large, right? So they're kind of this size, but they do just come in and they're just hanging on in this aluminum plate that's back here, which I think is kind of interesting. That is not what I would have expected. I would have expected more structure under there, but to be honest, they weren't soft very much for me, despite even the fact that this was really quite soft everywhere else. It was really just where I was standing. I could tell like everything was falling apart under there. But, you know, overall, actually it's minimal structure, which is a bit surprising. But yeah, here we go, continuing. All right, guys, so here we go. So this is it. You can see how gnarly this stuff is. It's soft everywhere. Look at the flex in this thing. It's just like, clearly this was a problem that needed solving. But peeling this back a little bit, I actually think I can scrape a lot of that off. I don't think I'll be able to re-glue it, but my boat stays stored indoors. This damage was from the previous owner that stored it outdoors. So I'm not too concerned about, you know, having it left out in the wet, etc. It just doesn't live like that. So despite the back of this being a little bit gnarly, I think I can use a scraper and scrape off this wood. You see how it just kind of falls off. And then I'm just going to do a good job sealing the wood under it, and then I'm just going to staple this onto the new plywood, and then reinstall and go from there. If it gives me another 10 years, I mean, that's great. There are other materials that actually, when I go to redo the whole floor at some point in the future, if I keep this boat, I might use something like a plastic plywood or something like that. Despite it being a little bit heavier, I just feel like that's the way to go down the road of just doing it once in a completely non-rot material and being done with it. At this stage, you might think, oh, why don't you just do that now? Given that I've gone through all the trouble of taking that apart, it really is not much effort in order to pull out these other two pieces at the moment. The problem is I can't find that material anywhere. Something in a 5/8 or a 19 millimeter is pretty difficult to find around my area in terms of a plastic sheeting of some kind, like UHMW or HDPE preferably. A starboard, right? Like an 18, 19 millimeter starboard would be ideal, though costly. So yeah, so that's kind of just where I'm at. The other thing is I'm wondering is, I wonder if I could be able to use the MDO plywood, which is a concrete forming plywood, and instead of revinyling it, just painting it with an outdoor all grip, something like that, for like a boat paint, basically like a deck paint for boats. I've used them in other restorations and they've been quite good. The MDO concrete forming plywood is really tough stuff, and it wouldn't trap moisture under a membrane like the vinyl does, which is I'm sure why the rot occurs. It just is trapped in there and it can't go anywhere and never dries out. Seems like a bad idea to me, but I do like the vinyl. I understand why it's there. I just really do wonder about its appropriateness for marine environments like this in terms of trapping moisture, because you can even see in the stringers here, if you look closely, like everything's still really wet in there. And this boat has not been in a wet environment. Every day I've used it in the last month has been completely dry, 30 degrees Celsius, beating sun. There's absolutely no reason for there to be any moisture whatsoever in this. And yet, despite it having maximal ability to dry in those heats and being stored indoors in between, it's still wet underneath. So I just don't feel like plywood wrapped in a membrane is a good plan for a marine environment like this. But for now, because it's summer and I want to use this boat some more, it only took a couple hours to take all of this apart. Now I know how it's done. Hopefully you now know how it's done. Reassembly will be fast, and if I have to take this apart again down the road, it doesn't bother me so much. It's, annoying, but it's not terrible. So yeah, so for now, plywood, reuse the vinyl, away we go, enjoy the rest of the summer and presumably a couple of years until I make a decision on what next material will go in here. Aluminum would be nice too, but ultimately, you know, for comfort and the overall look, I don't necessarily want this to be a straight utility despite it being a straight utility. My wife already complains that this boat is ugly. I don't need to give her another reason to think it is uglier still. So anyways, that's where we're at. You can see how much wood is just coming straight apart in this thing. But oddly, the center panel's fine. So yeah, here we go. All right, just back from the lumber store. Bought some good on one side. 5/8 ply. They had marine, but only in 1/2 and 3/4. And given that I'm gonna probably run some arbor coat over this, which is a good outdoor oil-based sealant and paint. It's black, whatever, it doesn't matter. But I've used it outside on wood to good effect. A number of times in the past, my shed is painted in it. And it's been outside, of course, through Canadian winters, etc. And it doesn't look any worse for wear, so I'm going to use it again to seal this stuff. The glue in this plywood is, you know, the water resistant, waterproof, whatever. I bought one grade up from the standard ply, standard roofing ply, which was like 50 bucks a sheet. This one's about 75 Canadian dollars a sheet. But not only is it good on one side, which I really don't care about because it's going to get covered anyway, but it's denser because instead of being spruce, it's a fir product, and so it's a little denser, a little heavier by maybe 15%, but more rigid, which is what I was interested in. So this hopefully was a good choice. I'm looking at what Lund probably used. It looks, in fact, there's a bit of a label still on there. Difficult to read what that says, but I suspect it was just a very basic, maybe marine ply, although if you look at it, there's lots of open knots in it and stuff, which is really kind of not typical of marine ply. There are knots in marine ply, of course, but this is exposed, whereas it's my understanding that marine ply would have better, yeah, this is just, it actually just says exterior ply, so they didn't even use marine ply in this in 2006. Looks like they just used regular outdoor exterior 5/8 ply. So this is one grade up from that. Hopefully that'll just mean a little more longevity out of it. I'm really not worried about it, but just interesting. That's just regular engineered outdoor exterior plywood. It's not even marine ply. Fascinating. So anyways, so I stenciled over the holes for the seats. Pre-drilled, I'll just cut those out. Then I'm gonna seal the whole thing while I clean the boat and go from there in terms of dry fit and see what we do. Because of the vinyl, I really want to reuse this vinyl because actually it came off so far in good shape. So I'd rather reuse it and not have to go through the expense this year of revinyling that. I'll do that when I redo the whole floor. So for now, seats stay in the current positions, just the way it's gonna be. Okay, onwards from here. So here we are now. Sorry, I took a day off to do other things, but I'm back at it now. What I did to salvage this vinyl was I took a scraper, like this one, and I scraped off all of the wood. So believe it or not, I could actually manage to get most of the rotten wood off. It's still kind of gross looking underneath, but it's dry. This was completely wet before I let it dry out in the sun for a whole day, which is why I'm a little behind on the project. I was hoping to actually do it all in a day, but this was so wet it really wasn't possible. But now it's nice and dry, and what I did notice is, actually if I flick this back over top of the new piece, everything lines up nicely, okay, except for, you'll notice right here, the vinyl has shrunk by 1/4 inch by drying out. Turns out I can pull this though. I don't know if I can show you this, but I can pull this and the vinyl is, there we go. See how I can stretch it and then it'll get to exactly the right length. But it's interesting that this stuff is somewhat rubberized and you can stretch it. So my plan is, and I started it yesterday, this section here has been glued down. It feels good, it's nice and flat. There are no kind of high spots. I actually definitely think that this is going to work out reusing this vinyl unless something crazy happens. I usually would use outdoor carpet adhesive in order to glue this down, but I didn't have any on hand. But I did have good old-fashioned PL Premium, and so what I did yesterday is I just put down a bead, especially along the edges, and then use this same scraper to flatten it all out and kind of move it around. You can see I glued up to about here, just to see as a test whether or not this glue would be adequate. And then I took a piece of pipe, it's actually a seat post that I made up. Oh, consequently, if ever you're wondering, 2-inch Schedule 40 pipe is exactly the same thing as what the pedestal seats are in the Springfield 2 3/8 inch seat system. So 2 3/8 is actually the outside diameter of 2-inch Schedule 40 pipe, except that very occasionally I run into a piece of pipe that is, usually it's the inside, or sorry, no, the outside diameter that's ever so slightly too large, so I stick it in the lathe and take it down a touch. This one I didn't have to. You can see I literally just put a notch in it with the mill. Could easily do that with a router or even a jigsaw if you really wanted to, in order to notch into the thing. But Schedule 40 pipe is the same thing. So most of my seat posts are in fact just that, because they're much cheaper, and I don't feel bad chopping them up into the exact length that I want. Anyways, that's what I'm using. Once I get the glue in there, I'm using this with some pressure in order to roll it all out to get this to look pretty nice. So far, so good. Everything's lining up, and I believe I'll be able to use this piece of vinyl. Now, one other thing, we were talking about seat positions, and something occurred to me. Given that these things are already 2 holes, and I can't really move them, of course I can't undo the holes, what is possible though is, why don't I just put a 3rd one in the position that I actually want my other seat to be. And I think that's what I'm going to do. I'm basically going to go 1, 2, 3 seat positions rather than 2, and then I can move things around as I wish. I'd have to buy another seat base. So by the time I get this all done, I'm just going to put in an additional aluminum plate under this thing, and I'll mark maybe with a Sharpie just some tiny little lines just to identify where that thing is, so that in the future when I get a new base, I'll be able to just mark it, cut it, and the aluminum will already be there. Despite this being installed in the boat already, I'll be able to add another seat post, no problem at all. So anyways, that was a solution I thought of just recently, and so far it's going quite well. Not much else to report other than I'm about to go gluing here. If you look at the bottom of this, I'm just going to flick this all the way back. Actually, I might have to remove this for a second. What I did to glue this was there you go, you can see what part's been glued. I smeared out some glue. You can kind of see that it's under there just a little wee bit. And actually glued pretty well. I feel like it's decent. I could probably tear that out if I tried, but it only has to hold enough that this doesn't bubble up. But anyways, I put it down, I spread it out, and I glued the one side only, so that right now what I'm going to end up doing is gluing a bunch of the rest of it, but I'm going to pull this side to the right length and clamp it as I go with the gluing, so that it ends up being the right length. That is the game plan, because ultimately I want to reuse all these little holes, because that tells me where the mounting holes are in the actual boat structure as well. So wish me luck. Here we go. Just a quick note, I've now spread the PL adhesive all over. It's pretty thick stuff, so I did it this way so that it's easy enough to lay down the carpet after that. I'm just going to spread out this little clumpiness here, because we're going to go over top of it again with the that bar I was using before to get it all smoothed out. But this is the starting point. This is enough. I've gone over the edges to make sure the edges of things are nice and smoothed down. But next step is I'm going to roll this down. I've got some clamps ready here, so I'm going to clamp it on the end to make sure it's the right length. And then I'm going to go down with the bar, put some weight on it. I've got some plywood ready over there to then put some weight on it. And then I'll leave it till tomorrow, and I'll do the last section tomorrow. I'm doing it in stages here because, again, I'm reusing this vinyl and it doesn't quite lie exactly how I want it. So, well, truthfully, in fact, maybe I'll put this on the floor, and maybe I can do it all in one day. Yeah, I think I will. I think I'll put it on the floor and try to do it all in one shot. I'll be back in a sec. Okay, in the end, because I had to clamp it, I left it on the table because there was no space to have these clamps sit where I could still roll the pin over it. So right now all I'm doing is, you can see there are some bubbles in it. I don't know if you can see that there or not, but by rolling this with some weight on it, I'm basically setting it down with a nice smooth path or a lay that will be nice under the feet. And then I'm going to come back around at some point and do the edges, but that'll be again another day. So I'm taking my time with this because I want to make sure it sits the way I want it. But unfortunately, I don't think there's a fast way of doing it because it'll be tomorrow before this is dry for me to do that last section. Then I'll turn it over, and I think I can do all the edges and the stapling all in one day, and then it'll be ready for install. But you know, it is what it is. There's no shortcut here, and I want to make sure it's done right. So that's what we're doing. So hopefully soon I'll have something to show you. So I had a few minutes while that was drying, and I pulled the middle panel off so that I could see what was going on underneath. And so for those of you wondering what the gas tank arrangement is on these boats, it's basically just a tank straight up the middle. Mine looks quite dark, you know, a lot of, I guess, just mold buildup over time. But what I was most curious about is this wire coming out the backside here, this little guy. I was hoping that wasn't the lights at the front and it was a sending unit because it was accessible to me. And as it turns out, it is the sending unit. Here it is right here. So I'll be able to open that up and test it because I wanted to see why my gas gauge wasn't working and also measure it so I can get a replacement. So that will be my next job, is to pull that guy apart and see what's in there. Okay, I've got the sending unit pulled out. So this is just a little float that rides up and down this stainless steel shaft, which actually it's in excellent condition, so I'm curious as to why I'm getting weird readings. Up on the dash there, you can probably see it, that's the leftmost right here, that's my gas gauge. And it never read anything under half before, so I'm wondering if this float actually just got stuck, because now that I've pulled it out, and I move this, as it goes up and down, it's basically just a rheostat. So like this would be full, and that should show full. You can see my gas gauge now reads full. And if I move this to the bottom, down here, that should read empty, which it does. And then I know you can't see it, but I'm gonna move the rheostat upwards, and you can see the gas gauge go up smoothly until it gets to full. So this system actually is fully functional, which is great for me. I was thinking it was broken, but I'm thinking it was just a stuck float. But if you're wondering how these things work, they're very simple. This is just basically a resistor, a variable resistor that varies based on how this float moves. And this is basically just a voltmeter on a, for those of you who are electrically inclined, it's a voltage divider circuit. It's basically all it is. So good news for me, I guess, but I will inspect the float to make sure that it's not waterlogged. That would be the other thing that would cause that. Although, weirdly, it showed always more than half full, never less than half full. So that would tell me it does in fact float. Because otherwise it would just sink at the bottom and stay there. Interesting. Okay, well, I guess I put it back together and I leave it alone. So back at it again here. Everything's dry, the whole thing's glued on the backside. I would definitely recommend this PL Premium glue. It certainly did a good job gluing. Now what I'm gonna do is go around and seal these edges. The edges of this, you can see the backside's pretty bad, but it's all dry and whatnot, and there's lots of felt still on there for the material to bind onto when it goes to glue against the wood. So all I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put a little PL very carefully. Doesn't take a lot, just a very shallow bead like this along the whole edge profile of where I'm going to be rolling this over the edge. Oops, there's some there. And then I'm gonna use stainless steel staples to staple this guy on, and hopefully that'll give me 10 years. That's the goal, 10 years. That's all we really need. Because inevitably something else will be broken, requiring the floor to get pulled up, whether it's that fuel gauge, whether it's, you know, something else, wiring, whatever. Boats always end up this way, so I'm not worried about it. So 10 years is the goal for this piece of flooring. Be careful here at the end that I don't overrun. Just a little in the corner there. Here we go. Oops, that might have been too much. But anyways, I'm gonna roll this over. Give me 1 second. And staple it. I don't know how I'm going to hold the camera while doing this, but you get the idea. I'm basically going to roll this over like this, kind of pull it tight, give it a good snug pull, and staple all around the edges. Okay, I'll be back when that's done.